Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. And this evening, I have the pleasure of having a guest who's actually located in Anchorage, Alaska. With us tonight here on Reference Point is Lynne Curry, PhD, who is going to talk to us about something I think we're going to find very interesting and quite relevant into today's environment, and that has to do with the concept of bullying. And we're going to focus on it in the workplace because it's a big thing in the workplace, not just what you see with young people out there on their on the internet and stuff like that, but it's a significant thing. So, Lynne, hello up there in Anchorage. Welcome to Reference Point.
I want to move south where you got warmer weather.
Well, we do. It was a beautiful day today. We had like 80 degrees here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, goodness, we're up to 45.
Well, you're getting there. You're getting there. So, Lynne, thank you for joining us here on Reference Point. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you. I've read some of your material. I've looked at the information on your website and whatever, and it's quite interesting. And I want to give the people a little background. You were telling me earlier your PhD was it social psychology or something like that?
I have a PhD in social psychology. I have a master's in teaching and undergraduate in philosophy and international relations.
Wow, okay, that's pretty impressive. And so what got you interested in this area of personnel and interpersonal relations and the workspace and that sort of thing?
Up in Alaska, I initially ran an alcohol, drug abuse, suicide clinic in far north Alaska where they had a suicide rate of 44 times national average. And we took the suicide rate down to 0.
Whoa.
The state hired me to do training all over the state at all the alcohol, drug abuse, and suicide clinics, and I discovered I liked training. A friend of mine and I agreed we would do a training session on bullying, and she was going to provide the muscle, the tough guys material, and I was going to make sure the training was great. And then she left town 3 weeks before the session because she had a family emergency, and I'd been bullied all my life, so I didn't know how to teach it, so I fast-track learned it and discovered I no longer had a problem with it.
Oh, fantastic.
And found that you can go from someone who has a difficult time in that topic area to somebody who really doesn't magnetize bullies anymore. So I have been, ever since then, teaching people how to do it. And American Management Association discovered I could potentially do a book on it, so they commissioned the book.
Oh, fantastic. So let's talk about this concept in general. What do we define as bullying?
Well, bullying is psychological violence in the same way that somebody might step on your foot. In bullying, they step on or into your mind and intimidate you, humiliate you, get in there and take away, erode your self-esteem.
And it's done like how? Through actions, words, what some people might think are funny jokes but really aren't? I mean...
Absolutely all of the above. So some people verbally bully. That's the name calling, the insults, the picky little comments that put somebody else down.
Mm-hmm.
Other people do physical bullying, and that's where most of the court cases come from. The pinching, shoving, assault, threat of assault. And then there is situational bullying where they cut someone else out of the pack in the workplace or take credit for someone until that person gives up and goes and finds a new workplace.
Got it. Is this something that is a major problem? Is this like a really prevalent thing? You hear about in the news a lot. You hear about the kind of cyberbullying that's going on with a lot of kids in middle school, high school, college age, and whatever, and the impact of that. But in this workplace environment, is this something that is really a prevalent and significant problem?
Absolutely, and all those schoolyard bullies grow up into becoming adult bullies because, frankly, bullying works for some people. When they've done studies to assess how many people are bullied, whether that's from Career Builder or some of the bullying websites, they've estimated that 3.5 to 4 out of every 10 people are bullied. And it's the rest of us who are trying to figure out how to get into the other 6.5.
Ah, okay. So does this type of activity, does it tend to be is there any gender specificity associated with it? Is it more aggressive males that are doing it than women, or is it's just sort of like it's equal opportunity bullying?
It's an equal opportunity event. Men bully women and other men. Women bully women and men. Bosses bully employees. Employees bully bosses and coworkers. So
it's amazing to me that is. So how do you deal with that? Why do you, it's obviously it's not something that should be tolerated, and unless I'm mistaken, there are regulatory things in place that are supposedly could prevent that or inhibit that type of thing. But
there actually aren't regulatory things in place.
There
Only
are not?
3 states in the union have any legislation against bullying. And a lot of people who are bullied hope that somebody else will see it and come to their defense, but that actually rarely happens. The original title for my book was Outsmarting the Workplace Bully, because I decided that targets had to learn how to handle the bully all by themselves in case their manager or their HR people wouldn't come to their defense.
So which 3 states have these regulations or these laws?
California has legislation against harassment and bullying, and Tennessee has legislation against bullying in the public sector, in government agencies.
Oh, interesting.
And I think it's Nevada or Utah who also has legislation.
Got it. I think, I don't know if the guys have showed it yet, but I think we have a picture of the cover of your book, Beating the Workplace Bully. We can throw that up if we can. And it's, I'm still having trouble just wrapping my wits about this, because, it's the kind of thing, I recognize that it happens, and I've probably, I'm sure that I've seen it. I don't know that I've been a victim necessarily, but I'm sure that I've witnessed people who go at it and are yelling at each other, or that trying to force somebody to do something in a way that may or may not be, I guess it can take many forms, in a sense that if you're talking to someone in your organization and you're hoping them or you're trying to get them to take an action for a specific reason and maybe do it in a particular way, I guess you can get pretty aggressive with how you're trying to push that thought process.
You've raised 2 really interesting points. One is that some people never get bullied. The other is that a person can bully occasionally without being a bully. To be a bully, you have to repeatedly, intentionally go after someone. And one of the reasons it's such a hidden disease is that a bully will select some people and not others. And it can be bad luck, or it can be that the target has something the bully wants, or it can be that the target is someone who doesn't know how to handle the bully.
So does the bully recognize that he or she is a bully?
Oftentimes they don't, and bullies are very good at justifying and rationalizing. However, bullying works very well, and we've seen examples of that in many large organizations, in government. Someone who cuts a wide swath through their opponents by bullying.
That's an interesting comment that you made, that it works very well. So, and is that because most people tend to be more, what's the word I'm looking for, subdued, or they get, maybe are they less involved, or are they less willing to push back? I mean, what percentage of people do you find in all your studies? Is this like there's 2% of the population that are doing this sort of thing, or is it 30% of people that are bullies?
It's not that big a percentage, and I don't have an answer to that. It's a great question. What happens, though, is someone who maybe is raised by a bully or raised by a very wimpy parent will discover early on that they can get what they want from other people by pushing their emotional hot buttons, by creating guilt or fear or intimidation. And as they continue to grow, They first bully in high school or junior high school, and then when they get into the workplace and they want something, they will pick on other people repeatedly to get what they want.
Interesting. You know, I see this kind of pushing the buttons sort of thing with my grandchildren. The two boys go at each other, but that's sort of on a different kind of level. And I don't equate that with the concept of bullying so much as trying to figure out how I can get what I want from my older brother.
You bet. And that's a good example of simple assertion. And you can be assertive. You can even occasionally bully someone else without becoming a bully. A bully will very intentionally decide that they're going to take someone else out.
So do people who are experiencing this, do they realize and recognize that it's happening to them?
Generally, they go into some level of denial. They wonder what they've done to provoke it. They try and pretend it isn't happening, especially if they don't have the skills to handle it. So one of the first traps people fall into with bullying is thinking, maybe if I just hang in here, this will go away, or if I'm professional, or if I'm polite, this will stop. And bullies don't respect niceness.
So what does one do? I mean, how does an individual, obviously you can leave, just get out of the environment completely, go work someplace else, though that may not necessarily solve the problem for you if you tend to be somewhat submissive to this sort of thing. But what can somebody do? What are the options?
I like to teach people how to turn the tables on the bully.
Ooh.
And one of the simplest ways to do that is if a bully makes a verbal slam at you, and you ask a question, at that point you've just taken control of the interaction. The bully, when they answer you, you've changed the power dynamic. So let's assume the bully says, "You look like a dog." And you say to the bully, "What breed?" You'll watch the bully blink in surprise, and it doesn't matter what they say, Pit Bull, Rottweiler, Golden Retriever. At that point, they're answering your lead rather than your being flustered or stammering or turning red or white or being speechless.
Interesting. Is that part of the information that's in your book, Solutions?
Absolutely. It's in both books, and I teach a lot of people how to turn the tables on a bully. It is interesting how asking a question changes everything.
Huh. I hadn't even considered that, but that's really fascinating. I'm in sales, right? And I find that that sort of thing comes up a lot when someone is raising an objection to your whatever it is that you're looking to offer them, and then you ask a question to probe a little bit more and find out what's going on. And it does change the dynamic. But I hadn't even considered that from the standpoint of what you're talking about when it comes to this concept of bullying in the workplace. That's fascinating.
Let's just do a quick demonstration.
Okay.
Would you, in a nasty, snarky voice, say to me, "Lynne, is that all you got done?"
Sure. Lynne, is that all you got done today?
Uh-huh. And that's the first thing to do, just kind of stand firm. But Dave, if you would say it one more time.
Lynne, is that all you got done today?
You bet. What would you like me to work on now?
That's great. I like that. That just takes the whole, it blows it out of the water. I mean, when you had me run that little drill, it's like I was prepared to come back with a retort on whatever you were. But then when you asked that question, it was like I've got nowhere to go.
As one example of a real life situation, a woman who was going for a job where she wanted to become the CEO of a large corporation. She and another man who was not quite as qualified were both competing for the position. And one of the things that was going to happen was for the several quarters before the promotion was announced, she and this other gentleman were going to talk in front of the board in their area of expertise. So when she walked up to the podium the first time, he was sitting near the podium and he whispered to her, "Fat thighs." And she just totally froze. It threw her off her game. She was very embarrassed. And when her supervisor said, "How come you were so flustered?" She didn't want to say because I didn't know how to handle him. She didn't know what to do. She gave me a call. And 3 months later, when she again walked up to the podium, he again was sitting right near the podium. And he said to her, "Big butt." He said that loudly enough so all the people around him heard. And she turned to him and said equally loudly, "How does that matter to you?" So if you can outsmart the bully, if you can turn the tables on the bully, you can take on a bully in private or in public. They really don't know how to stand up to it.
That's incredible. Before we go on, there's something I want to mention to the folks who are viewing, and that is if you have any questions about this topic that we're talking about, which is fascinating here and very significant, I think, send us those queries at info@referencepointtv.com. I'll get the query over to Lynn, and I'm sure she'll respond to you. So, all right, well, that's fascinating, and it's like, how do you... The example that you gave of that situation with the woman who was trying to, was competing for a position. If you're going in to a career opportunity, maybe you're looking to interview for a position, what do you look for to see whether or not there's some toxicity in an environment that you may have to deal with? Is that something that is it all visual? What do you listen for? What do you look for?
Well, one of the things to look for is a heavy duty, a very strong turnover rate. Another is how you're treated in the interview process. If the interviewer greets you pleasantly, if they respond to your emails, if they ask you questions, if they listen to your answers, that indicates it might be a fairly healthy work environment. If you have to beg to get a response back, if the questions you're asked are somehow invasive or insulting, you might know that it might be a more toxic environment.
But the interviewer or the person who's doing the interview may not necessarily be in the part of the company where you're going to end up doing whatever you're going to do. So are there any other signs to look for other than just the person that you're interviewing with?
One of the things you can do when you're applying for a job is you can intuitively get the vibe of the workplace. And if there's a person who's bullying, what you'll feel is a whole different kind of work environment than an organization where people are happy. If you come into many offices, you hear people talking back and forth, you see people productively working. In an organization where someone is being a Darth Vader, Attila the Hun, you'll see people with their head down and they're not sticking those heads up.
Got it. Cool. So let's flip the coin and say if I'm the person who's doing the interviewing and I'm trying to, and I'm someone who's aware of this concept of needing to make sure that we're not bringing these kind of people into my organization, what do I look for as an interviewer?
When I'm asking, an interviewer is asking an applicant questions. They can often start back 3 or 4 jobs and ask what led you to take that job, what led you to leave it, and ask that repeatedly for each subsequent job. Somebody who's a bully often plays the blame game. Somebody else was responsible for them leaving. A type of bully, which is the narcissist bully, when they talk about something, they won't give anyone else credit. It's all about me. And the easiest way to spot a narcissist bully is to give one small piece of criticism to them, to say something such as, "I noticed a typo here," or "I didn't think you quite answered the question." And narcissists cannot take criticism. An angry, aggressive jerk, which is another type of bully, you can easily make a statement or ask a question, maybe say, "I was curious about this issue that showed up on your reference," and they will flash back. They won't be rational and easygoing. Their back gets up easily because they can't take it.
Huh, fascinating. So how many different, you mentioned 2, the narcissist and the however you worded it, the
angry, aggressive
angry,
jerk.
aggressive jerk, right? So they're like categories like 3 or 4, or there are 10 or 12?
In my book, I listed 7.
7, okay.
One of the most dangerous kinds of bullies I would call the scorched earth fighter.
Ooh.
That's someone who not only wants to dominate and win, they want you to lose. Another type is the character assassin, who through rumor and innuendo destroys you.
Yeah.
And that's the type that most often goes into cyberbullying.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
A real favorite type of mine is the wounded rhino. And if you think about a real rhino, they gore and they gallop, and they are ill-tempered when messed with, and they act with calculated malevolence toward other creatures in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And a wounded rhino, different from a scorched earth fighter, they want to dominate you, but they don't want you to go anywhere else because they want you around.
Interesting.
And then one of the most crafty types is the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the shapeshifter. And they can really charm the people at the top of an organization, but people under them feel their claws.
You know, this is actually fascinating because I think when you think about it, I've seen these kinds of behavior patterns, the different ones that you've identified and mentioned. I've seen them in all kinds of organizations, in you know, church organizations, in school activity organizations, parent-teacher associations, companies, political parties, you name it. It's like it's everywhere. So, is it possible? It's clearly from what you've mentioned, and it's possible to sort of defend yourself or put yourself in a position where that's not going to be a significant thing, and you can just sort of let it roll off your back. But is there a way to get the bullying person to kind of like figure out, just to have the light switch go on and realize that their behavior patterns are non-optimum and they can just change?
It's easier to train targets to change than it is to train bullies to change, because bullies often get a lot of payoff from bullying. However, one of the things we do in coaching is we do a 360 review where we interview other people about the person who is potentially a bully. And when they see in black and white how they're viewed, they don't like it very much. Sometimes the top person in the organization is the biggest bully of all. And those folks tend to be very curious as to what their employees under them are thinking of them. So they'll often go for a 360 review. I get sent in my practice a lot of Darth Vaders, where the organization will send the person in. And what will happen in the first interview is I'll tell them a couple things about them in terms of how they're interacting with me that surprise them, that they find useful. And at that point, we have some level of credibility because I'm actually giving them some skills, particularly if they're a bully who bullies because it's their only way of getting what they want. When they get other skills, sometimes they're willing to change. Well,
I was going to use one word, but it isn't the right word. But it's hearing that it's possible is that's a positive thing. It's like, okay, there is hope.
Right.
There is hope.
There is hope.
Okay, so we've got maybe 4 minutes left in the show. So can you give us a little bit of a summary then of what we've talked about?
Sure. In the workplace, somewhere between 3 and 4 out of every 10 people are suffering from some level of bullying. What you can do with a bully is you can identify what's going on and you can learn to outsmart them, to turn the tables on them. There are many types of bullies in the workplace. They bully physically, they bully situationally, and they bully verbally. And most of us have seen one or another of the 7 types of bullies. Great.
Not great that we've seen them, but great that from a summary perspective. So I know that more of this information is in your writings. I know you have a blog that you do some communication on, and you've got the books and everything. So I think this is like totally awesome. So I very much appreciate your taking the time to have this conversation today. It's been interesting to me because I've worked in environments where somebody is a bit aggressive, and I just sort of tune them out and go do my work, and then come back and when they're feeling less aggravated about something, or I put a good product on the table and it's like, oh, okay, everything's fine. So, but I can see how a lot of people are likely to cave in a situation like that. Especially, is there a cultural component to this in any way, shape, or form?
Well, I've had a chance to train in some organizations like World Bank, and have discovered that there are some cultures in which assertion, ambition, and dominance are so prevalent that there are more people who I would think fall into the category of bullying. There are also people who are raised, as many women in our country are, to accommodate, to go along, to get along, and they are more prone to being bullied.
So being assertive does not necessarily mean that one's a bully, though. Is that correct?
Being assertive is a good thing. It's one of your best defenses against a bully.
Okay. But it's then taking it to like a level of need to control, which is at a higher level of than just assertion, I guess, that really starts to cross the line. Am I?
That's a great insight, and what I can say is that most of us, we believe in win-win. Somehow we're work it out together. Bullies have a win-lose operating style. They win, and they don't mind anybody else losing. They have not the same conscience that keeps them from trampling on someone else.
Fascinating. Well, Lynn, we're running out of time here today, so we've kind of reached the end point for the show. But I thank you so much. This has been enlightening to me. I hope it's been enlightening to the folks who are going to see the show. I know I can see heads bopping up and down from members of the crew here. How this has been fascinating. So thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. Well, we put people have your website, your blog website. That's been on the screen a few times, and they know what the names of your books are and stuff like that. So I really want to thank you for being here and greatly appreciate your knowledge and your skill. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have here in the studio, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.
Thank you very much.